and thank you for joining us for this chat with our artist in residence, Swarm. My name is Bettina Forget. I'm the director of Visual Voice Gallery. Visual Voice presents contemporary art projects that combine art and science. And aside from exhibiting art, the space also occasionally hosts artists in residence, such as our guest today, Montreal-based multimedia artist Swarm. This is our third chat with Swarm, so please go to our channel and check out the other two videos that we've done with her, one at the beginning of the residency, and we also had a chat with Swarm kind of halfway through at the halfway mark, where she goes more into her research process and development. Swarm's work fuses cosmology, fiber art, sound design, and performance, both in the digital realm and in real life. Swarm started her residence at Visual Voice in December 2020, a year ago now, using the gallery space as her art and research laboratory for the following 5 months. Since then, she's been busy completing her artwork and setting up in a digital space in the VR environment Mozilla Hubs. During this chat, we'll do a quick recap of her research into time and space, and then talk about the outcomes of her stay at Visual Voice. Welcome, Swarm.
Thank you.
All right, it's great to have you back. It's been a year. It seems like no time at all, and you know your work is about time and cosmology, so that's kind of very fitting. So tell us a bit, like maybe a quick recap of your research question that you came into at Visual Voice Gallery, and sort of what also the media that we're working with. Just give us like a small flashback.
Yes. So yeah, my residency I titled In the Beginning because it's about cosmology and the early universe specifically. It's kind of a launch pad for my artistic practice, my research creation practice that I've been developing over the past couple of years called Astrofibers, which is an artistic inquiry into astrophysical concepts, particularly the nature, structure, materiality of the universe from micro to macro. It encompasses all mediums of art with a focus on traditional and contemporary textile methods, but it's currently focused on specifically cosmology. When I started the practice, I was more focused on the multiverse theory and black holes, but in the past year and a half, I've been really moved by learning about the early universe and the progression of the universe as it exists and how it will inevitably end and all that really wonderful kind of scary stuff. So my research question was, what was the early universe like? Because I sometimes fantasize about what it was like. So I would love to have been able to observe it or be there. And in some cases, you still can observe it, very much far removed from, say, telescope observations, or at least optical telescope observations, but still it's observing. And I think even just the minuscule ability to do it with a radio or a television is really just super fascinating. So in the previous talk, I talked about one of my mini research questions. It's like, what was the early universe like? Was like the umbrella question. And then I got into other questions like, what was the size of the early universe? And I came across an article in Forbes. Ethan Siegel, he's a cosmologist and he writes for Forbes about cosmology, and he answers people's questions. And a viewer asked about like the entropy of the universe at right after the Big Bang, and consequently, Ethan started getting into the size of the early universe. So basically, the smallest conceivable answer for the size of the early universe is about 17 centimeters in diameter. And he says it's about the size of a soccer ball. So I already had this sphere. Okay, first of all, I was like super moved by the idea of the universe being the size of a soccer ball, because that's really small compared to what it is now, which is like almost incomprehensibly vast for the human brain. So it's pretty fantastic to think about how it was once so little. And I already had this sphere that a friend gave me that I made a little, like, I called it the celestial sphere back then. This was in like 2016, 2017. And it was just like a ball with dots on it. And like, I still love that ball with dots on it, but now it's like the same ball, but with more dots on it. Because basically what I wanted to do was repaint this sphere as a depiction of what the early universe was like when it was the size of a soccer ball. So I painted it over and I got to work. And this is some progress shots from when I was still in the gallery. Basically just like painting a lot of dots. And I'm going to touch on this later on, but the early universe was basically composed of quark gluon plasma. And most of the time when you look up images of it, you're just going to get like computer rendered particle diagrams, which are super cool. Don't get me wrong, but probably not great for me to do. So I was just like, I kind of took some artistic freedom with it. I was like, okay, I'm just going to do 2 colors of dots. One will be the quark and one will be gluon, and together they'll be the quark gluon. And then, so I picked iridescent purple and white because those are like 2 of my favorite colors. And I was like, why not add some pink into cosmology, because I see a lot of blue and red and yellow. And I was like, I can do this, so I will. So it took a long time. It took weeks. And, you know, it actually has a really cool texture to it because the paint kind of like has little points coming out of it. So it's like a really cool, interesting piece. And this is what it looks like completed. And I called it Infant Universe because it feels like I'm holding like a baby in my hand, but it's like not a human, it's the universe. So I took this performative photo with it, and I also took a photo of it on its own. And I also transmediated it digitally for the upcoming Mozilla House show. And that was actually relatively simple to do, much more simple than actually creating it physically, which usually it's the other way around because digital has such a huge learning curve. But we did good. We did good. And then I also had another question. What did the early universe sound like? And so basically I learned that it was a very low inaudible hum, and it was like really bassy and really drony based on this description, which I covered in detail in the last talk. So I will leave it for now if that's okay. Okay, cool. And so basically he makes this comparison to traffic and like a motorway, like, you know, off in the distance in terms of decibels of the early universe. So I was like, okay, let's run with this metaphor. I live on a really busy street and it connects to a highway. So I decided, let's go field recording on the highway. And I also left my Zoom recorder out on my porch during morning rush hour because we get a lot of vibrations here, lots of them. And I've also been using a very low frequency contact microphone since our last talk to record even lower frequency vibrations. So I'm going to be elaborating on that. I didn't use it in this piece specifically, the first audio piece to come out of this residency and this body of work, but it's coming. So I ended up making a piece that was kind of a sonification of this photograph that I took. This is, I got blackout curtains in my room, and like that sounds really mundane, but it was actually really inspiring for me artistically because I have like a lot of windows and a lot of light play happens, especially in the winter because the sun is in a different part of the sky and it reflects off the cars on the street. And it just makes for some crazy shows in my room. So one day I just like walked into my room while the curtains were closed and I found this visitor here. And I was like so moved by this like little splotch of light on the wall. I started photographing it and I was like, it's the early universe. It's the primordial fog. And I called the audio piece Primordial Fog Sonified because I was like kind of inspired by NASA's data sonification photos that they post on social media. Personally, I have my own feelings about how they are composed, but to each their own. But I was like, let's reference data sonification, but it's like my own picture of the early universe. And I made it like a matching audio piece, and we will provide the link to that into the description. Yeah, so basically I described this photograph as being made with photons and shadows instead of calling it a photograph, because it really is made of photons. Like that, like those photons took like thousands and thousands of years to reach Earth and meet me in my bedroom at that very moment. And I found that like so beautiful and like, at risk of sounding cheesy, very cosmic. So I was just like, that's super cool. And then I was like getting super into photons, and I want to continue exploring the photon on its own later on, once I'm finished the body of work I'm currently working on, because during this residency, I've done research, and I've gotten so many ideas that I can't even keep track of them all. So I'm just trying to like take them one at a time. But yeah, so it's my first time referencing, like, basically it's my first time describing a photograph in this way. Because like if I called it light and shadow, I don't think it would really come across the significance of the fact that these are like, this is like really old light, like super old. And it's like only here for a fleeting moment. Like I was like, okay, we've got to do this right now because it's not going to last. So it was super cool. And it's like one of my favorite photographs of all time. It's super minimal and super, what do I want to say? Super on theme to what the minimal theme of my residency has been so far. And in the previous talk, I also talked about this fiber art piece. It's made out of ribbon and retro-reflective thread called From All the Way Out Here, Everything Looks Recent. I don't have much to follow up on in terms of the actual physical piece. I took these photos of it in my room with blackout curtains, and I really liked how they turned out. So I'm thinking I might actually just exhibit it in a dark room, because I find that when I put my, like sometimes I'm moving stuff around and I put my retro-reflective pieces in my room, and they're like in the pitch black room, but they start glowing like crazy just from the light coming in from the bedroom door. And it's not even that much light. So I'm like, okay, I'm definitely gonna show this in the dark. It's gonna be really cool. So I ended up transmediating the piece into a video work with Max MSP, and there will be a link in the description for that as well. And it's basically an audio reactive max patch where all these lines, they kind of like expand and contract and expand and contract based on a field recording I took with one of my electromagnetic microphones. Specifically, I took a recording of the electromagnetic frequencies coming off of a scan card key lock at the UDM building near my house. So I made like a audio piece, and I exhibit it as a video right now, but my hope is to exhibit as an interactive piece in person sometime. Like instead of having a field recording, like demonstrate how the patch works, it will react to the movement and noise of the people who are viewing it. Or at least, yeah. So that's something else I completed. I completed it in July. And I'm really proud of it, and it's part of the show as well. And so, do you have any questions?
I do. I mean, there's something that I noticed in the three pieces that you've talked about, how you use light as a medium. And when you were talking about the infant universe, you said, oh, you know, it was white. And I just, I like that you used like these two different colors to signify the two different particles. But even the pink purple color that you're using, it is reflective, right? It's not like an opaque color. So already there, you're getting this like, is the color there? Is the color not there? You know, the sort of ephemeral feeling of light, which is picked up again in that beautiful piece with the that was caused by the blackout curtain. And, and then again with the reflective tape. So I find it very interesting in how you're using light and giving it personality, and sort of messing with us is like how we even exhibiting it and how we're seeing it, and should we see it in the dark, should we see it in the light, and how the object changes and how our relationship to light changes. So I thought, for you it's 3 different pieces, but for me, seeing it from this perspective, I really see a running thread there.
That's fantastic. Yes, I consider light to be like an astrofiber medium. I think like I really want to experiment with it more, especially being in the apartment that I'm in. Like I have lots of natural light, and sometimes the light just like plays with random reflective surfaces, and I'm like see something on the wall, like this new phenomenon, and I'm like, where is that coming from? And I try to look for it, and I'm like, I need to really harness this and like put things in spots purposefully, because every little fog of light I see a little early universe blob now. So I think
Yeah.
it's like it could be a cool series eventually.
Yeah, and I think that's also one of the points of doing a residency, right? It's not that you have X amount of time to finish X amount of pieces, but it's to sort of get your entrance going and give you a vacuum of space where you can really start to develop ideas and have new ideas come in, which will then hopefully serve you for like a couple of years that you can draw from, right? And I feel that that's what you've been doing.
Absolutely. I have more than enough ideas and experiments to do for definitely a couple of years at the very least. Cosmology is such a vast topic, and I'm endlessly inspired by it. And I'll use that as a transition to talk about my muse, which is the cosmic microwave background. I didn't even realize that it was my muse until like the other day, because I learned something new about it the other day, which, I obviously don't think I know everything, but I thought I knew most obvious things. And so I'll get into that now. But for the sake of recapping and being consistent, I'm just going to say again what the cosmic microwave background is for the audience. So the cosmic microwave background is relic radiation left over from earlier stages of the Big Bang. And it's currently the most important way of understanding the properties of the young universe. And I recently learned in an article in Universe Today written by Paul Studer that the cosmic microwave background is in fact the brightest object in the entire universe and is responsible for over 99% of all photons. And he describes the cosmic microwave background as the universe's baby picture, which I thought was super perfect. And I actually shared the article on most of my socials because I was like, this is it. This is the most concise, accessible article that I've seen on the cosmic microwave background. And like, I really want people to know what it is because it's so prominent in my work. Like every piece I'm doing is about the cosmic microwave background, essentially. Here in this picture, I'm actually starting a piece that I'm still working on. In fact, I started it in April near the end of the residency. And it's on black felt. I really like black felt because it doesn't reflect a lot of light. And it reminds me of Vanta Black in a way. Obviously, it's not Vanta Black, but it's like pretty close because it's felt. So it's got that texture that just light doesn't bounce off it as much as like say black fake leather, pleather, or even just normal black fabric. It also has I really like the texture of felt in terms of the universe because like needle felting felt and like flat felt, all of it, because up close, microscopically, it looks like what computer simulations say about the structure of the universe. It looks kind of the same. So I'm really into that. So here I am tracing the edge of the cosmic microwave background, which is kind of like a philosophical act in itself. And I also had another breakthrough when reading Brian Greene's book. He talks about how if it weren't for all the tiny, tiny, minuscule density fluctuations that occurred in the early universe, we wouldn't have it wouldn't have clumped into larger structures of matter. It wouldn't have formed elementary particles such as protons and neutrons. We wouldn't exist without them, basically. Those tiny, minuscule density fluctuations. And I just find that really fascinating, and how our origin story is one of like non-uniformity, but not obvious non-uniformity, because on the larger scale, like the universe is smooth, uniform, homogeneous, especially the early universe, but those tiny, tiny imperfections, or do we call them imperfections? I don't know. It just basically, if it wasn't for those tiny little things, that we would not exist. So I found that really moving as well. So it moved me to start creating this piece. A lot in my work, I use this motif that I call star beings, which is like genderless beings that like represent all people. So everybody can see themselves in that motif. It doesn't matter who they are, where they come from, they see it. And I know it works because people say, oh my God, it's me, when they look at it. And I'm like, great, yes, it is you. Of course it's you. It's everyone. So I started drawing and cutting out all of these little star beings from retroreflective fabric ribbon that I bought. And at first I was using super glue, which was like such a noob move. I had to start over eventually in June, because I learned of a better method, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I didn't think of that before. But like one of the people, Jen, who works at the Textiles and Materiality cluster at school, I was telling her about the project, and she was like, you should use heat and bond. And I was like, what's that? And at first I really wasn't open to it, but the super glue was not looking good. I was like, I had to be too careful of where I applied it. And then sometimes the glue would rush out and I had no control, and it would get all over the star beings and everything. So it was like looking pretty messy. So I started over, and at this point in this photo, I believe it's early July. So I'm a little bit closer to the end now. And basically it's like, I call it, like, this isn't the title specifically, but in my head, I call it early universe star beings, cosmic microwave background kind of thing. That sounds really like nothing at all, but I'm still working on a title. Sometimes I call it star being, cosmic microwave background. Basically, it's just to come across, like, I use the shape, like the oval shape, the classic cosmological oval shape of the CMB, and then put all these reflective star beings in it, because it's like kind of, it speaks to the fact that we wouldn't exist without those density fluctuations. So that's still a work in progress. I'm literally looking at it right now. It's right over there. I've been taking a break from it because it's actually a lot of work. Like, you have the fabric, and then you have to put the heat and bond on the fabric, and then you have to draw it, and then you have to cut it, and like, they're really hard to cut out because the fabric is like about this tall. So it's a lot, but I'm really excited to finish it because this one, especially in the dark, it really just pops. Like, it's crazy. I'm really happy with this piece, and I really can't wait to show it in real life at some point. Any questions?
I just want to say how much I love that piece, and I remember seeing it, like an early version of it when you just started making it in the gallery space, and there's something sort of micro and macro about it. Like when you see it, well, now that you have it in an oval shape, it looks more like those microwave background radiation images. It is so reminiscent. But when you first see it, and it's like, it could be like microbes, or, you know, like a Petri dish as well. So I think that also draws a nice sort of connection between that famous Carl Sagan quote that we're all made of stardust, and that we all come from cosmos, and that we're just these tiny beings floating in space on this pale blue dot that is hurtling, you know, around the galaxy. And so, and we all like kind of cramped together like this. It's like all huddled. It's a really lovely piece because it's a little bit ambiguous, but it still communicates a really clear message. And I'm looking forward to seeing it finished. So kudos for you for starting over, because I remember how far along you were, and then you're going, it's not perfect. That's like, okay, I'll do it again. And I think this is, you know, it was one of the questions I had for you is like, what hurdles you ran into as you are doing the residency. And I think, you know, sort of wrestling with materiality as a fiber artist. I mean, you're doing a lot of very sort of intellectual work, but you're also working with your hands. So having those synchronize, you know, the message that you worked out, but have your material reinforce that. I think it's a lot, it's kind of central to your work, and it's like great to see you sort of experiment and be ready to iterate with this piece.
Thank you. Yeah, and like since I learned that the CMB is like the brightest object in the universe, like I'm kind of like looking at this piece in a new way and this material in a new way, because it's essentially the brightest material I can get my hands on. You know, because I'm not really into like super neon colors, and you know, white paint is white paint, but this is like something completely different. So it's like a whole other level of bright. And honestly, like the discovery that it's responsible for like over 99% of all photons, I'm kind of like, excuse me, like I need to recap, I need to regroup, like I need to relearn some things, like, and I have to like clarify, like, okay, so how much of the photons that I actually see are from the sun or from the cosmic microwave background? Like that's really strange and really cool at the same time. So that's like, that's, it's pretty intense, you know. And seeing on the thread of retroreflective fabric, I've been weaving a lot this past summer. These are two different projects here, but I wanted to show both of them because weaving with retroreflective thread has not been a piece of cake, especially in the first image where you can see it's going through the heddles. That was like, I did another waffle weave basically with just retroreflective thread. And it was on a 12 shaft, but I did it only 8 shafts. And I was on a tight schedule because the person who owned the loom was moving out of Milieu. And yeah, so it was like really intense. So on top of wrestling with the materiality of the thread, I also had to not a great, I didn't have time to take really. I had to rush through it and I kept running into problems. I had to protect the loom from the thread itself because it's made out of micro glass beads, basically. It's like a blend of that and like polyester or nylon, either or. But all retroreflective things is micro glass beads. So it's glass, basically. And when I was winding the warp, it cut into my fingernail, like the friction. Yeah, like there were slits in my fingernail. And so I was like, okay, I will damage this loom. So I put newsprint over the parts where the thread is exposed to the wood. Yeah, and then one of the threads like literally broke itself at some point. So I had to tie it. And then the beater on the loom kept like untying the knot. And I thought I was never going to get past that knot. Like I was going crazy. And like the piece turned out nice. Like I didn't give up on it. But it was like, there was a lot of headaches and a lot of like, oh my God. Because like, I don't think anybody in the cluster had used retroreflective as a warp before, because it's one thing to use it as a weft, like I am in the second photo with a cotton warp, but it's a whole other thing to use it as a warp itself. So it was pretty challenging. I'm eventually going to put together a little info PDF or something on my research of working with this material alone, just so that if other artists want to work with it, they can like save themselves some pain, like emotional pain. Yeah, so in the second photo, I'm basically using this weaving pattern called undulating twill. I really like it because it's really wavy and it reminds me of radio waves. I did a radio piece with the undulating twill like a couple of years ago for one of my classes, and I decided to do it again, but with retroreflective thread. And then I kind of had an epiphany after I took the sample warp off the loom. I was like, okay, but what am I actually going to do with this? Like, it looks good, but what am I going to do with it, right? And then I remembered I'm super obsessed with radios, and I'm obsessed with the idea that you can hear, like, between certain frequencies on FM radio, you can hear the cosmic microwave background static and also primordial stars. So like the first stars, cosmic dawn essentially, the first stars that were born in the universe. So I had an idea. I was like, okay, I'm going to build a radio sculpture because antique radios used to have what they called grill cloth, which is like basically the fabric that covers the speaker. And there's a lot of interesting patterns of grill cloth, and I'm planning to research grill cloth as its own thing more and more because I find it really interesting, and it's a really cool intersection of like engineering and textiles once again. So essentially, I'm making a bigger version of this. It's about 15 by 25, 15 inches wide, 25 inches long, and I'm going to build a radio sculpture around it. And my hope is that people will observe it on their own in the gallery. So it'll be like people are standing around the radio or sitting around the radio like they would in the old days, but they're listening to static, which obviously will not be super, super comfy, but it is what it is. And then they'll have the experience of having the reflective elements and basically an immersive listening experience for the cosmic microwave background. Because this pattern also reminds me of TV static in a way. So it's kind of a cool intersection of all these little concepts that I'm interested in, and like early universe observation. I have this like concept, the early universe observer. So like the viewer becomes a viewer of the early universe. So I feel like this is a really good way to drive that home sculpturally and with textiles at the same time, and with sound. Like it's all there, and I'm really excited. I'm going to design the shell. And the opening, I'm not going to do a square. It's going to be an oval again. So I'm really excited about that. Anything?
Yes, I just love how you are fusing digital media, sort of old manual techniques like weaving. I think like, weaving is one of the like oldest technologies that we have as humans. Mm-hmm. And then this kind of fast forward to the sort of vintage aesthetic of sort of mid-century radios and everything sort of together. And then this like, brand new material. It's just such a mind meld that you're doing there. I really love it. But there's always that consistent thread of, investigating sound and early universe sound, and even blurring that distinction between sort of photon and radio. It's all part of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? So you're just sort of riding along that spectrum back and forth from the radio to the visible. And it's a beautiful ride.
Thank you. Yes. And it's actually, I love how you mentioned that it's like it's got a lot of temporal aspects from like ancient technology to like vintage retro technology to this crazy new futuristic material, retroreflective fabric and thread. Yeah, exactly. Like one of the things I'm actually working on in my work, like slowly, is incorporating like older technology as the medium, like, or as part of the practice. Because I find that since technology has been moving so fast, it's a really good timekeeping and temporal, and it adds a temporal dimension to a work. So basically it's like, since I'm always touching on time and like, how you can look back 13.4 billion years into the past, or is it 14.1? I think it's 13.5.
I thought it was 13.8. But
okay.
Hey, you're the person who's done more reading than I have.
And yet, so basically the idea that you can look in 2021, like we're all here, and the universe is pretty old, 13.8 billion years old, but we can look almost 13.8 billion years into the past. In fact, that's the farthest we can look into the past because we can only see the observable universe. Any light that started traveling before that, we won't see. So we're very limited in that sense. But still, that's pretty cool. And like, when you look out into space, you look back in time. So I really like playing with the temporal aspects of like older technology and like looking into the early universe and kind of like time traveling a little bit. Because, when people are being educated about astronomy and like intro astronomy classes, they learn that, they're looking at the Andromeda galaxy as it was however many billion years ago, or million years ago, et cetera, et cetera. And it's always something that really fascinates people. So I'm trying to just like figure out more ways to play with that concept of kind of like punking time, kind of. And another piece that I started during the residency is inspired, well, again, by the early universe, obviously. But I read this article, and it was like about these scientists that created 3 different shapes of quark gluon plasma in a laboratory. And these are the shapes that they came up with. And I just thought, oh my God, they're so beautiful. And I was like, this is the most astrofibrous piece there is. Like, they're not even me, and they're doing it better than me. Like, as an artist, I don't exactly have the access or the knowledge to go into a lab and just be like, hey, quark gluon plasma, cool, I made it. But I can be inspired by it. And basically it led me to making, I wanted to make a primordial soup because, people often think of the primordial soup as like that sludge that we all evolved from on Earth, but it actually doesn't just start there. It starts at the Big Bang. So I was like, okay, let's play with this term and make a actual soup. Like, I bought a bowl, and I have these like metal grains that I found, and I'm basically gluing them all together because like there's 2 types, but like, and like a lot of people would say you don't need to glue them together. You can just do it. You can just have them be in the same bowl. It's fine. No, it's quark gluon plasma. So obviously, I have to glue them together. So it's really it's really challenging to glue those together. And that's like, and like, every time I think I'm getting there, I put them in the bowl and I realize, wow, I'm really not scratching the surface at all. So this one's going to take a long time, very long time. But I'm excited about it. And eventually there will just be like this bowl of it, and there will be a spoon, and people can interact with it. Hopefully not put it in their mouth. It'll be one of the many sculptures that I have to show by the time I have enough completed pieces to show.
Your work is so whimsical as well, it's like they're very serious cosmological, mathematical, physical concepts that you're wrestling with, and then you go, it's called gluon. I'm just going to glue these together. I mean, it's just so charming, and I think that's a big part of your work as well. That I think that makes it more than science communication. That sort of brings it into the art world, because that's something people can really relate to. So how many of these gluons are you going to make?
Well, I definitely won't be able to count ever, because they're like this big, like when they're glued together.
And you're going to fill it up?
I'm hoping to. A friend of mine suggested that I put some sort of base and then like coat the base with it. So we'll see how far I feel like taking it, I considered it because like, how much do I have to really suffer for my art? But at the same time, I'm kind of like, I'm pretty hardcore about being like literal. Like, if I want people to stir the spoon in the primordial soup, I don't want them to run into like some foam or whatever. So we'll see. But this one's going to take a long time. There will probably be hundreds, even thousands, because the bowl is pretty big. And I'm using super glue once again, because that's pretty much the only glue that dries clear that I could use to glue metal together. So I also have plans to I have retroreflective powder that like nail techs would normally use, because you can get retroreflective nails done. And I want to kind of like coat them with it. I tried using retroreflective spray paint on them already, but it didn't really take. I think it's because they're too small. So I bought the powder and I was like, okay, let's mix the powder into it somehow. So it will also play with lights in more than one way, because it's also shiny. And I kind of always pictured the early universe soup to kind of taste like metallic, kind of, because it's just, I don't know, really dense hot plasma. Like, I probably wouldn't be able to taste it. It'd probably burn me to a crisp if I tried, but it would probably blind me even if I looked at it. So I actually follow this one scientist on Instagram, and she posted to her story, she like some plasma in the lab, and I was like, wow, that's bright. Like she's probably wearing like really dark goggles. So yeah, it will be shiny as well. And
You get a spoon and sunglasses if you want to eat it.
oh my God, that's such a great idea. Yes. Yes. Sunglasses are also part of this like body of work. Whenever you're ready to get into the virtual show, I will talk about that because that's definitely happening there.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So for the virtual exhibition in Mozilla Hubs, I have been working on some special digital pieces. One of them is like a basic image, like a digital rendering of the early universe. So basically what I did was I went into Blender and I started working with procedural textures to like inspired by a tutorial about making like a galaxy or a nebula, but I kind of just like was like, okay, so here's how you're doing that. Okay, now I'm gonna do my own thing, because I didn't want to create that necessarily. So I created this. I baked the texture onto the surface, and then I saved the texture to my computer, and then I uploaded the texture to Second Life, and I put it on a Second Life prim. And in Second Life, one of the cool things about it is that you can make things glow. And so what I did was I made the prim glow, and then I took a really high resolution machinimograph of the prim with the texture on it. And that's what you see here. So these black spots kind of are a shout out to those density fluctuations that occurred in the early universe that created us. And going back to the performative machinimatography and selfies that I've been doing, I put my avatar in front of it, and she's wearing sunglasses because holy heck, it's bright there. You know what I mean? So she's just chilling. She's observing the early universe. She's right immersed in it. And I just like, that's something I would never be able to do in real life. So I found that really entertaining. So this piece will be in the show, and as well as another piece that I've been mulling on for literally like probably 7 months or longer. Who knows? I lost count. But I really wanted to do my own rendition of the Maxell ad, the tape ad from like, I want to say the 80s or 90s. I remember seeing it in the 90s because I'm a 90s baby, and my mom had Maxell tapes. Like she would record albums to tapes, and we would play them in the car because we didn't have a CD player until way later, probably like mid 2000s. So we were doing tapes, and I always saw the Maxell guy, and I was always like, I always looked at that photo as a kid, and I was always kind of like weirdly intrigued by it, but like it looked kind of scary to me as a kid. The original photo is here, so I don't know why I found it kind of scary to look at, but it's just such an iconic image. And since I've been doing sound art about the early universe and how the Big Bang was such an impactful moment on us all, I was like, okay, let's redo this, but like for the Big Bang. So I put this together in Second Life, and I have a particle emitter, and I took this photo hundreds of times just so I could get the particles just right in the frame. And I called it Blown Away Gal because the photo is known as Blown Away Guy or Blown Away Man. I don't think that's how the photographer Steven Stigman intended it to be titled, but that's what it became known as over time. So this is kind of like a shout out to old technology once again. And also it kind of has a personal aspect to it because one of the reasons, like I find electronic music very cosmological for me, at least, especially techno, very dark techno. And I go clubbing as often as I can, to listen to the music. And when I'm in the club, I'm thinking about all these concepts and like how the structure of the music kind of like could be related to that. And I've always pictured like if I were to sonify a black hole, like I would use a bass drum or a bass drum drone or something along those lines. So I think about that when I'm listening to the music, and she kind of looks like in the first version. Like I remember you saying when you looked at it, She looks like she's in a club listening to music. And I was like, of course she is. Yes. And now I also added another dimension to the photo because I kind of wanted to give a shout out to the first scene in Back to the Future, where he has this huge, huge amplifier and he turns it all the way up with his sunglasses on and he just plays one note on his guitar and then he goes flying. So I was like, let's put the chair in the air. Like, let's have this sound be so impactful that like she's flying and she's like holding onto the chair. So I thought, I had a lot of fun doing this, but I also spent a lot of time overthinking it, like the pose and, the arrangement. But I'm really happy with it now. And that will be in the show. It's like one of my most highly anticipated pieces in the show. And then, of course, the mentioned transmediated fiber works will also be in the show, fiber and sculptures. So this infant universe sphere will be in the show as a digital entity. And these machinographs will also be there. So I'm really excited to officially reveal these.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being in the space and having a different perspective on them, because when you're there, there's a relationship between the size of the work and you yourself that is different than from me looking at them now on my computer. So, I'm looking forward to sort of wandering around and discovering your work in 3D, even if virtual, especially virtual because they are digital works. So I think maybe it makes a lot of sense to bring real life into the digital world. Because that's it's their native habitat.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sad that most of the physical works that I'm making won't be in the show, but there's just limitations to how much I can do with transmediation in Mozilla Hub. So I'm just letting that go and looking forward to elaborating on the virtual show in real life at some point. Hopefully, well, I'm not going to say hopefully soon because I'm still working so hard on all these pieces that it's going to take a long time, especially since I'm like, you asked what one of the struggles was during the residency. Well, one of the biggest struggles was the lockdown and the curfew. Like I planned to do like an immersive audio installation, like for people to experience in real life. I don't know if you remember that from my proposal, but
I do remember. Yeah,
I still plan to act on that. But I didn't get to act on it there, which was so unfortunate because I had the space, right? But it is what it is, COVID.
Yeah, COVID. I think considering you sort of struggled through a pandemic with like lockdowns and everything, the works you developed are still like really phenomenal and involve deep thinking and lots of iterations. And thank you for sharing also with us like the stuff that didn't work. Like the tangled threads of it, because I think that's integral to real creativity. If everything works, that means that you didn't try anything new, and you definitely did. So that was lovely to see. What did you feel like came out of the residency? Any sort of new insights aside from how to use that loom properly when you're using that reflective thread?
I think my main takeaway is back to that idea of the density fluctuations at the beginning of the universe and like how it's responsible for our existence. So it's more of a conceptual takeaway, but that is like the overall lesson for me. And it's like my overall focus. Like eventually I had to stop reading and start making more because it's hard to balance the reading and the note taking from the making. And I was like, okay, if I don't make a bit more, then I'm never going to finish. So that's always going to be an ongoing tension with this practice. But I'm also working on tracking all my research, like finding a method of organizing all of it so that I can easily reference it later when writing and when looking back. And also if I have everything written down, I can kind of like match my ideas to where I found the research they come from. So yeah. So my takeaway was mainly conceptual, and also kind of like just also realizing how hard it is to actually organize research and do research, like hardcore research. Like I feel like I barely scratched the surface of the syllabus that I wanted to, and I feel like that's probably pretty typical, because we talked about this last time, I get really excited about books, and then I'm like, I'm going to read all these books in like 2 months. Obviously, that's not going to happen.
Well, also the texts that you chose are really dense. You're not just reading books, you're reading, like cosmological texts. So kudos for getting as much reading done as you did. I mean, you really put the research into research creation here. And yes, it is difficult to balance, but I think you go from phase to phase, like this, like really intense absorption of ideas and new facts and data, and then you sort of go full on making modes and experimenting and executing. And that I think is the normal part, that kind of cycle of the creative process.
Yes, thank you. It's super fun. I'm having a great time with it, even with the struggles of the materials.
All part of it. And I think so the last part, I think, of the creative cycle is always exhibiting it. So I'm glad that we've had these 3 Zoom talks where you were really generous sharing your ideas and your process and like work in progress, and now sort of sharing with us the outcomes and where you got to, and then having this show Mozilla Hub where people can just wander around and see it firsthand. So thank you for setting all that up. So we had also a lot of back and forth there, and but you pretty much sort of curated your show with, we just had like a couple of meetings, but I think the show is also basically an artwork that you've done as well. So looking forward to have everybody experience that exhibition online.
Me too. It's been many months of thinking and putting it together. I'm excited to hear what people have to say about it, if they have anything to say at all. So
yeah. Sure they will. Oh,
yeah.
I will. Well, thank you again. Is that your final image?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you for this wonderful presentation and talking about your work. And I'm very excited to seeing you in Mozilla Hubs in sort of 3D.
Me too. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.